All right, finna go ahead and get it started. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Life of Champ podcast for today's episode 259. We're going to be discussing moral victory fatigue. Now, this is going to be an episode that I think might be very, very interesting to a lot of people, and maybe you can relate with this. I'll be speaking from experience today. To go ahead and get it started, if you do not know me, my name is Champ, and I help men win. I'll be helping you win by giving you, hopefully, some content that'll be somewhat relating to your life, something that pertains to something that is of your experience and we'll see how this goes today. So, essentially, what is a moral victory? To be able to attain a moral victory, it's going to look like taking a defeat or obtaining a failure that can be interpreted as a victory or success on moral terms. So, you know what? It's like this, right? It's like, let's just say you're on like a sports team or something like that, right? You're on a sports team and you guys lose, but you tried your best. And be like, you know what? That loss doesn't feel as bad because at least I tried my best. And that is the moral victory. It is essentially it is in a weird way kind of like an ideal perspective in terms of trying to cope with a loss, right? Or cope with an inconvenience or cope with an experience that's less than, if that makes any sense. And I'm gonna relate this to my experience. I'm going to be relating this to the experience that I see so many of Gen Z kind of feeling in the same type of boat where they can't stop taking moral victories, right? They can't, and what I mean by that is this is like they give themselves that version of existence more than the actual win that does exist, if that makes any sense. So, and obviously this episode being moral victory fatigue is essentially the concept of me, and not only me, but people who are also having the same experience, getting truly fed up with taking these moral victories. Because quite frankly, it's not a supplement to the actual thing that you would like. And there are some people that get so caught up in these moral victories, maybe they don't even take fatigue. Maybe they just think that's a normal thing. And I'm here to tell you that's not. So the Gen Z experience, through my own personal experience and through the experience of many other people, is we are in a weird way delayed in our life growth, right? And I'm not here to be the person that's going to be asking for your pity. I'm just here giving you exactly what I see. I see a lot of people kind of delaying this odd version of, transitioning from a teen to adulthood. I see this very awkward stage that we're in right now. And it's this stage where, we are handling our business in some ways, but yet we're not really financially competent to be able to be living the most individualized experience as a generation. So, like for example, right, when compared to generations previous, it seems as if to have that individuality or to have that essentially living as a man, right? The experience of being a man, whatever that looks like to you. And like I said, some people that's going to be like I said, a very individualized experience where you move out, you do this, you do this, you do this, and you can pursue a lot of different things coming out of high school, and you're able to develop your life and live like a man, right? But I see this all too often is this very very odd predicament that does exist where a lot of people are struggling, right? They might have gotten degrees or have went to college. They might they might be in a lot of different positions, or they might have learned a lot of things, and it might not mean as much. And I mentioned this on plenty of episodes, right? Our dollar doesn't even mean as much as, let's just say, the dollar that was made 15 to 20 years ago. That the entire environment, the entire living situation that did exist is no longer what it is today. And I find that to be interesting because then you get into this the eventual experience that I'm talking about, right? The moral victory fatigue. Um, and the thing that I observe is it is a lot harder for you to attain the average life, right? And people will give themselves these moral victories in order to not fucking lose their sanity. They'll say, you know what, it is okay, it's okay that I'm not where I want to be because, at least I can do this, or at least I'm like this, or at least I spent time doing this. Instead of actually, doing exactly what they would like. Given the current circumstances that we're in, it makes it a little bit more difficult than it should be in order to get the very, very bare minimum of what it is to be the experience of a man, right? Whatever that looks like for you. I had a very interesting conversation um, with my friend recently where I had began to shout out to KJ. We had a really good conversation because we were talking about that exact thing, right? The experience of being a man. What does that even really mean nowadays, right? And essentially what I came down to is we are taking a lot of moral victories, right? We're trying to give ourselves this kind of altered lens of the reality that's not ideal, but it is the reality that we do exist within. And instead of just, succumbing to this reality and being miserable, we kind of, want to uplift ourselves and, think positive and give ourselves this moral victory, even though this isn't exactly what we want, we're going to tell ourselves this is still worthy of having. And you get into this weird, very, very weird mindset or mentality where you're in this play to not lose kind of mentality, right? You're not playing to win, which is the motto of the podcast, right? You're not playing to win, you're just playing to not lose. And it admits this game, you're still losing. You're still not doing or being as much as what you could and should be doing and being. And that's the very, very basic reality that I think does exist for a lot of Gen Z is they are in this experience of it being much harder to attain some of the most basic things that is the male experience, that is the American dream, that is all these things. And in a weird way, it almost feels like you need to be lucky in order to live either average or above average. You need to be lucky. You need to, be in the right place at the right time. You need to kind of like I said, be given an opportunity of some kind, which I guess in that sense it could be, chalked up to luck or chalked up to whatever. There's people that, are pursuing paths that are what conventionally would be to give you an advantage in this life. And maybe it was a complete advantage, let's just say 15 to 20 years ago. Those things no longer provide the same exact value. But yet, society is going to convince you that these things, present the same amount of value. But when you go out and live in the world, you'll come to this quick realization that these things don't necessarily have or carry as much weight as once before. Um, you see this with, let's just say, for example, college, right? People that are in college nowadays, they're going to get an education. They're going to hopefully maybe develop some skills, maybe. Then they go out into the workforce and try to look for a job within that field. And then you realize that half the people that are in high school that graduate, half of them go to college. Half of those people that go to college don't even get a degree. They don't even get a job in what they got their degree in. So, and then a lot of the people that are actually trying to find their job or got their job, they didn't go through it with the most ease that they probably should have gotten, right? If the entire system is convincing me that this is the right move and then I go ahead and do it and it is way harder than what it should have been and way harder than it was for a lot of the people in the past that have made that same decision, took that same route, took that same course of life, you can't help to be, giving yourself these moral victories. At least I went to college, I could have not went to college, things like that. And then it becomes this version of a less than ideal life becomes a new normal for you. And like I said, you're in this mentality, this mindset that is to play to not lose, right? And sometimes accepting a loss for what it is actually the best for you, right? And also being less than satisfied and not giving yourself this moral cope is actually genuinely better than just saying, you know what, I'm going to try to make this negative and turn into a positive. And this comes from a person that has had this perspective as far as positive thinking. Um, I made a podcast a while ago talking about undefeated mindsets. This is something that I made probably within my first 100 podcasts. And while I do believe a lot of those things to be very, very true, and they can also give you a complete advantage in terms of how you live your life, I do believe that some of those things, and not I was obviously naive a little bit, of course, but a lot of those things are kind of a shift in mindset, so you can't lose. Like I said, it was called the undefeated mindset. But in some of those ways, you're taking moral victories. You're telling yourself that, it is okay that you didn't get what you want because you can appreciate what you didn't get. And in a weird way, it's almost as if you don't take these moral victories, and if you don't take these moral victories, then you're almost losing your mind in the reality that does exist, that is very, very bleak, very, very harsh in terms of the truth of the reality that you exist within. And I came to the conclusion myself because I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of work on myself, on my personal brand for the last 7 years. And I'll be honest with you, I deserve more than what I've gotten, 100%. For the amount of work, the amount of hours that I put in, for the amount of output that I've gotten out of it, I'll be honest with you. I feel like I deserve more than that, for sure. And with that being said, I'd ask myself the question, and I don't feel like there's an issue with asking this question, especially if the work is there. If you can prove that you've put in the work, if you can prove that you made sacrifices, if you can prove these things, if your character can be shown and presented to somebody, and for them to recognize the character that has been developed over time, I ask myself the question of how many more victories can I give myself before it doesn't mean anything anymore, right? And essentially what I'm trying to get into is this. Moral victories in a time of, less than ideal time can be somewhat beneficial, right? I've heard many of these things, and I want you, if you're watching live, I want you to give me an example of a common moral victory or common cope, not what I would like to call it, because it's pretty much just cope, that you hear all too often. I hear people saying it's not a loss, it's a lesson. And while that is true, and I'm not saying that, these things that I will give an example, right? I'm not to say that these things aren't true. These things that I've told myself, these things that I've heard other people tell themselves, while these things are true, they're not what you actually want. And I need to make that very, very clear. They're not actually what you want. They're not actually what you deserve, maybe. But yet, if you're going to give yourself this illusion that does exist, it is okay, then you're almost setting yourself up for a failure in the long run. It's almost like this, right? You can give yourself the moral copes of patience. It takes patience in order to get what you want, right? You can give yourself the moral victory of, what, it's going to take time. Your time is coming, and obviously that hints at patience, of course. You can give yourself, the moral victory of, what, this sacrifice is going to be worth it one day. And maybe you need to be willing to make more sacrifices. Maybe understanding that mindset does exist. You might need to eat more shit in order to gain something in the long run, right? Which is again another hint of patience, right? You need to be willing to work harder, or you need to be willing to work more hours in order to get what you want, right? Or yeah, just all the things like that. And while these things are true, and maybe they do have some basis in reality, what does actually mean something is the fact that you haven't got what you want. Simple as that. You haven't gotten what you might have put work into. You might be lacking something, but you might be telling yourself a completely different reality, saying that's okay, even though it's actually not. Even if we're actually being honest with ourselves, it's genuinely not okay. It's genuinely not enough. It's genuinely not. It's just not enough, and that's what it is at the very, very base. In the most basic form, it's not enough. When I talk about moral victories, while I am a very optimistic person, while I'm a person who thinks the future is going to be in hopefully a better place than it is right now, the harsh reality that does exist is if you keep taking these moral victories, it's not going to add up to an actual victory. You have to go out and get that. You have to go out and get that victory, whatever that looks like for you. And it's like this, right? To give you an example of another moral victory, let's just say you go ahead and, you know, you go talk to a girl, right? She rejects you straight away. And then you give yourself the moral victory of, you know what? At least I went up to her. Well, you still don't fucking have her. And you still don't have a woman. And you're still missing one of the most essential things that is to this human experience. So you still don't have you still don't have what you want. But you're giving yourself this illusion that it is, it was a good thing, right? It was a loss, but it's a lesson. It's something that I can learn from in this. And like I said, while that might be true, that's still not what you want. And at the very least, you need to understand that if you're a person that takes these moral victories, you need to be fed up with your situation in order to truly make it change. Because if not, you might just settle into this lifestyle where, you're being grateful for where you are, but you're not exactly where you want to be truly, right? And this might be setting you up for a long-term failure where you're taking these moral victories, these things, you're thinking about the glass being half full when you actually want a full glass. And there's nothing wrong with wanting a full glass, and there's nothing wrong with working towards trying to have that glass to be full. But just don't give yourself this illusion that it is okay for it to be half full when you know for damn sure that it's not, right? And at the end of the day, you must ask yourself the question, what is this all for? Right? What is this all for, right? Obviously, and maybe this is a moral cope, maybe this is a part of the moral victory fatigue, right? What I have done everything for is character development, truly, right? The reason I started this podcast partly is because I wanted to develop my character and to be able to see the growth long term, right? To be able to say, you know what, I can watch this episode back and I can tell that, these episodes that I'm making now are much better than the episodes that I had made before. And that maybe in some weird way would give me a certain satisfaction or a certain sense of progress or fulfillment or whatever, right? But doing it for that character development is very, very important. But even after that, there still needs to be something more than the character just being developed. Because here's the thing. Let's just say you have a very developed character, but you have nothing to show for it. And maybe you have the character, maybe the character is enough. Right? Maybe that's a moral maybe that's a cope in itself. Is just having good character without any recognition, is that truly enough? And for some they'll say, you know what, it is enough. Maybe. But if you don't go out into the world and if nobody can recognize that you have that character, then it almost is for nothing. Right? And that's truly what it is. I mean, like I said, maybe maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll look back and I'll say, you know what, I was definitely wrong in this time. But if you haven't gotten exactly what you want, it is okay to be, not satisfied and not satisfied with what you have. That's what I'm saying, right? And I know you need to be grateful and thankful and all these things. And to an extent, I do believe that these are nothing more than moral copes. For you to be grateful, and if you're trying to attain any type of mastery, if you're trying to attain any type of greatness, you must not settle into this mindset that will deteriorate from your ambition. So, in a weird way, the way that I look at it is this, right? You need character, and obviously you're still looking for the W's, right? You're looking for the big W's, right? And in order to get the big W's, you would like to think character needs, you need to develop your character in order to get the big W's. But here's the thing: if you have the character developed and you have no W's to show for it, then it almost doesn't mean shit, right? In a weird way, right? Let's just say, I'll give you this example, right? Let's just say you've gotten everything that you ever wanted, right? Let's just say these are the W's. We'll say that, right? Let's just say you've gotten everything that you've wanted, but let's just say that you didn't feel good within yourself, right? And that's what I say. When I say character, that's kind of what I'm talking about, right? Is when you leave an interaction, you can say, I at least put forth all of what I could have into that interaction. I was being as genuine as I could be. I was being as honest and truthful as I could be. I was being as integrous as I could be as a man, right? That is what I would deem to be character truly, right? And with that being said, if you were on the pursuit, let's just say you had gotten everything that you could have ever wanted, but you did your character wasn't caught up with your accomplishments, you would still feel a type of lack within yourself, even if you had the W's, like I had mentioned, right? Even if you had conventionally what most people want, you would still feel a little bit empty inside for sure, right? So I'm not gonna neglect the fact that character doesn't have importance, because obviously it does. But to have character and no recognition, and then you're gonna say, oh, character, you don't need any recognition if you have character. I think that's fucking cope, in my opinion, right? So I'm kind of getting off topic, but hopefully you understand, and hopefully this is making some sense to you. You need to have both, right? Go develop the character that is going to be worthy of the W's. On the pursuit to developing the character, if you still don't have the W's, you need to really evaluate if you're giving yourself cope, if you're giving yourself this moral victory fatigue, and also when you also get fed up with it. For me personally, I'm done giving myself any type of good or satisfactory feeling if I don't already have what I want, right? I'm cool with just living in a perpetual state of negativity if that means it's going to motivate me enough into action to go ahead and pursue what I want. I don't want to be in this state where I can just say, you know what, I put a lot of work in and that's enough. Because quite frankly, for me, for example, I have put enough work in order to attain a good amount of success. And this is where it comes from, right? And maybe I'm just giving you my life story, but this is Life of Champ podcast at the end of the day. But essentially, I've given enough, and I've done enough work, and I've seen a lot of people get more from less, and I can't help but to feel some type of way. Yes, it did. Yes, it did help me to develop my character. But in the same breath, when you go out into the world and people don't give you that recognition that you feel like you deserve, and here's the thing, you have to also realize, and you have to be honest with yourself, right? Am I willing, and am I actually worthy of the recognition? That's the truth. That is something that you have to be truly honest with yourself. Are you worthy of the recognition? Have you put the work in? Do you have the receipts that justify this sense of potential recognition? And if you don't, then that's what it is, right? For me personally, I believe that I do. So when it comes to that, right, and you're not getting the credit, you're not getting the recognition, you built the character. But here's the thing, people can't see your character sometimes unless there's something else that they can see that is a W. You see what I'm saying? So it's like I'm done taking the moral victories, saying, you know what, champ, you did good. You put in, you've made almost 1,000 videos. You've sat in front of the camera over almost damn near 300 times, and it's okay because nobody watched you because at the very least you developed your character. See me, I'm not willing to just say, that's good enough. I'm not. I'm not. Because when I go out into the world and people don't treat me like I've done, like I've put in hours into my craft when I actually have, that's something that you can't help but to feel some type of way, for sure. So don't don't give yourself these moral victories in abundance. Don't give yourself these copes, because even though they are true, in terms of, like I said, it's not a loss, it's a lesson. It's all for character development. It's all, in due time you're going to have what you'll reap what you sow. You know what I'm saying? It's all of these moral victories, right? All this collective moral victories that do exist. But if it isn't exactly what you want, who the fuck cares? You're doing that for you, but nobody else cares, bro. That's what it is at the end of the day. So if you could, whether you're rewatching this or watching this live, please give me some moral victories that you hear people talk about, these copes that people talk about, these copes that make people sleep better at night, that don't actually mean shit because they aren't exactly the real win that does exist. And I could give you one, like I mentioned, I'll keep mentioning it, right? It's not a loss, it's a lesson. Yes, this is true. But also, it doesn't mean shit because you still lost. We play this game, we play to win, right? That's it. We don't play to not lose, we play to win. That's it. That's the motto. That's the that's the foundation that does exist with for this podcast, right? You play to win. You don't play just to play. If you play just to play, and I mentioned that, right? The ultimate win is to play. To an extent, that is moral cope. That is this moral victory that does exist. But what's actually good is winning. We all know this. There are some people who don't want to live within this reality that does exist where, you know, they lose and they want to feel good about a loss. They want to tell themselves that it's okay. It's not okay. You lost. It's not okay. Don't ever give yourself this illusion that not winning is okay. Don't ever give yourself this illusion that something that isn't exactly what you want, that supplement is even close to exactly what you want. When we all know it's not. So I just see it all too often, man. People just like, and here's the thing. Maybe it's not necessarily a moral victory, right? Let's just say for a moral victory is something like progressing in a video game. That's a moral victory. That means absolutely nothing, right? That means absolutely nothing. You succeeding in a video game means absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of life. But yet you're giving yourself this moral victory. That's another one. Anthony, good shit right there. Everything happens for a reason. And while that is true, there's some things that happen. You just and like I said, maybe you're just naive in the moment. And like I said, maybe this is another fucking cope. But everything happens for a reason. I'm gonna tell you right now, I can give you a list of a lot of things right now, but there's damn near no reason for that shit to be happening. And like I said, maybe I don't have the full perspective, and I don't see the grand scheme, the bigger plan, all this shit. But here's the thing, man. Sometimes things happen for no fucking reason, and let's just be real. Let's just be real with that, right? But don't, like I said, don't give yourself this illusion that these things are actual fucking W's when they're fucking not, bro. You either gonna be good in your craft or you're not. You either have a craft or you don't. You either pursuing something that is worth your time or you're pursuing something that's not worth your time at all. And even if you're progressing in something that isn't truly worth your time in the grand scheme of your whole life, don't give yourself the satisfaction of it's okay. If you win in a video game, who the fuck cares? Nobody does, bro. Go out and get a real W, right? It's another thing, right? Another moral victory in a weird way. Let's just say masturbation and porn and all this shit, right? You're giving yourself the illusion of having sex, bro. That is not a W. That is not a W. So with that being said, go out and have sex, bro. Don't give yourself this illusion. And I'm so sick of this society that does exist where you're giving yourself this illusionary win. It's not an actual win. It's nothing more than a moral victory. Who the fuck cares? Go out and get a real win. Go out and get what you actually want and stop giving yourself this supplement of what you think that you can live with because you're living without. That's just not okay with me, bro. That's just not okay. I'll never be okay with just taking these moral victories. I want to win. And hopefully you watching this right now, hopefully you want to win just as bad as I do or more than I do. But to be in this perpetual state of taking victories that no one gives a shit about, that doesn't move the needle or doesn't change your life at all, it's not okay. People will tell you that it's okay. I'm here to tell you the complete opposite. It's not okay. Go out and get a win or it doesn't mean shit. Here's the thing. You can have plenty of moral victories. You can have plenty of character. But if nobody recognizes that shit, if nobody looks at you like you've built something or done something, then it means nothing. That's the harsh reality. That's what most people won't tell you. So go out and get a win. Go out and do something with your life. Because if you don't, no one's going to fucking care. Most people don't care if you've done something, let alone if you do nothing. Nobody fucking cares. And in a weird way, it can seem as liberating. No one cares. Oh, okay, well, if nobody cares, then nobody cares. But if nobody cares, you probably don't even care either. You see what I'm saying? So yes, don't give yourself these illusionary W's. Don't give yourself these moral victories. Don't give yourself all of these copes. You either have what you want or you don't. It's as simple as that. You either have what you want or you don't. And if you don't, then you need to attain what you want, because everything else is a fucking illusion. That's it. It's as simple as that, man. So, I don't really have too much else to say. I'm sick of taking these fucking moral victories. I'm not here to tell myself all these things to make me feel better. I'm either going to achieve what I want or I'm not. I'm either going to be a winner or I'm going to be a loser. I'm either going to be a success or I'm going to be a failure. That's the harsh reality that does exist. Fuck all the moral victories. Fuck the moral victory fatigue. Stop giving yourself this fucking delusion. Stop living within this delusion. You're either a winner or a loser, and it's as simple as that. This is episode 259 of the Life of Champ podcast, talking about moral victory fatigue. Change your life, man. Do something. Win. Win in actuality, bro. Don't just win in this fucking weird version of this mindset, or this fucking, this thing that you've created for your reality. Go out and get a win, and you're gonna live much better than that. I'm not here to tell you these fucking lies, bro. That's it. That's all I have to say, man. You have a good night. Tap in with the next podcast on Thursday. I'll be going live again Monday or Tuesday. Tap in with that for sure. And other than that, if there's any specific topics that you think I might have something that you would like to hear, feel free to leave it in the comments. And other than that, thank you for your time and attention. Y'all have a good night, and until the next time.